This 1889 portrait seemed innocent, until historians uncovered the truth about the child. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had spent 15 years studying Victorian-era photography, but nothing prepared her for what she found on that humid August afternoon in 2023. The Philadelphia Historical Society's archive room smelled of old paper and preservation chemicals as she carefully turned the pages of a leather-bound portfolio labeled Henderson Studio Collection, 1885-1892. Most photographs were predictable: stern-faced businessmen, corseted women, family groupings frozen in time. Then she saw it, a formal portrait of a child, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, seated in an ornate chair. The child wore an expensive white lace dress with delicate embroidery, hands folded perfectly in lap, light brown curls framing a face with pale skin and striking hazel eyes. Something felt wrong. Sarah leaned closer, her practiced eye catching details others might miss. The clothing, while expensive, seemed slightly too large. Borrowed, perhaps. The backdrop was Henderson's standard parlor scene, but the lighting was unusual, deliberately soft, almost flattering beyond the studio's typical harsh contrasts. But it was the child's eyes that stopped her cold. Despite the formal pose and elaborate costume, there was something haunted in that gaze, a depth of knowledge no child should possess. The mouth was set in a practiced smile that didn't reach those eyes. Sarah photographed the portrait with her phone, then checked the studio's logbook. The entry was sparse. April 12, 1889. Child portrait. Payment received in advance. No name recorded. No name. In an era when photographers meticulously documented every client for their business records, this omission was extraordinary. She noticed faint pencil marks on the photograph's reverse side, nearly faded after 134 years. Holding it up to the archive's examination light, she could barely make out 3 words written in hasty script: for his future. His future. The child in the elaborate dress was a boy. Sarah's heart began to race. This wasn't just an unusual photograph, it was a deliberate construction, a carefully staged image meant to conceal rather than reveal. Someone had gone to considerable trouble and expense to create a very specific illusion. But why? Sarah spent the next 2 days immersed in research about James Henderson, the photographer whose studio had produced the mysterious portrait. Henderson had operated one of Philadelphia's most prestigious photography establishments from 1882 until his death in 1903, catering to the city's wealthy families and documenting the city's social elite. His studio journals, preserved remarkably intact, revealed a meticulous businessman who recorded not just names and dates, but often personal notes about clients, their preferences, family connections, payment terms. Yet the April 12, 1889 entry remained frustratingly sparse. Sarah cross-referenced the date with Philadelphia's historical records. Spring of 1889 had been a turbulent time. The city was rapidly industrializing, its population swelling with immigrants. Racial tensions simmered beneath the surface of civic progress. Pennsylvania had abolished slavery decades earlier, but segregation and discrimination remained deeply entrenched in daily life. She found something intriguing in Henderson's personal diary, held separately in the Historical Society's manuscript collection. The entry for April 11, 1889, one day before the mysterious portrait, read, "Received unusual request. Payment generous. Conscience troubled, but the cause seems just. May God forgive me if I'm wrong." The next entry, dated April 13th, simply stated, "It is done. The child has a chance now." Sarah's hands trembled as she photographed the pages. Henderson had been conflicted about something, yet felt compelled to proceed. The generous payment suggested wealthy clients, but the lack of names implied secrecy. She began examining other photographs from Henderson's studio during that same period, looking for any others with similar anonymous entries or unusual circumstances. Most were straightforward, labeled families, dated events, documented occasions. Then she found another anomaly. 3 months after the child's portrait, Henderson photographed a well-dressed African-American woman, alone, unusual for the time. The entry read only, "Personal sitting. No copies requested. Original delivered. Could there be a connection? Sarah's mind raced with possibilities, each more troubling than the last. She needed more information: census records, city directories, newspaper archives. The child in that portrait had a story, and she was determined to uncover it. Sarah arrived at the Library Company of Philadelphia before dawn, her laptop bag heavy with copied documents and notes. The research librarian, Marcus Chen, had become an invaluable ally in her investigation. When she explained what she'd found, his expression grew serious. "You're looking at racial passing, aren't you?" Marcus said quietly, pulling out a reference book on African American history in Philadelphia. Sarah nodded. "I think so, but I need proof." Marcus guided her through census records from 1890. If a family was attempting to pass their child into white society, they'd need documentation. Birth certificates could be falsified or lost. But census records, school enrollments, church registries, those create a paper trail that's harder to erase completely. They started with Philadelphia's 7th Ward, a predominantly African-American neighborhood in 1889. The ward's records showed dozens of families with young children, but cross-referencing with school enrollment records revealed something striking. Several black families had children who suddenly disappeared from local records between 1888 and 1890, with no death certificates filed. "They were sending them away," Sarah whispered, understanding dawning. Families with light-skinned children were sending them north or west, giving them new identities. Marcus pulled up newspaper archives on his computer. "Look at this, April 1889, just weeks after your photograph. The Philadelphia Tribune ran a series of articles about a network helping mixed-race children relocate for educational opportunities. The articles were coded, careful, but the message was clear. Certain families, often with means and connections, were making heartbreaking decisions to separate from their children, giving them European-sounding names and fabricated backgrounds so they could attend white schools, pursue professions barred to black Americans." Sarah found an advertisement from Henderson's studio in an April 1889 edition of a small African-American newspaper. Discreet photographic services available. References required. Inquiries confidential. "He was advertising to black families," Sarah said, "specifically for this purpose." Marcus leaned back in his chair. Henderson wasn't just a society photographer. He was part of an underground network helping families save their children from segregation. That portrait wasn't innocent. It was revolutionary. Sarah's breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a collection of personal letters donated to the Historical Society in 1967, unprocessed and largely uncatalogued. The donor had been an elderly woman named Ruth Patterson, who'd left behind correspondence spanning 50 years. Among the letters, Sarah found one dated May 3, 1889, written in elegant script on expensive paper. "My dearest sister, the deed is done. I held him one last time yesterday before Mr. Henderson took the photograph. He looks so beautiful in those clothes, so different from the boy who runs through our garden. He doesn't understand yet why he must leave, why Mama's face is wet with tears while she smiles and tells him of his great adventure. James says the family in Boston is kind, educated. They have no children of their own and will raise him as their son. He will attend the finest schools. He will never know the sting of being turned away, called names, denied his rightful place. But sister, the cost, my heart breaks with every breath. I'm trading my son's presence for his future. Is it right? Is it merciful? I no longer know. I know only that I love him too much to let him suffer what we have suffered. The portrait will be all I have left of him. Mr. Henderson promised to make one for me as well, though it cannot be displayed, cannot be explained. I will hide it away and look upon it in private, remembering the child I bore, the child I must now pretend never existed. Pray for me, sister. Pray for us all. Your heartbroken Constance." Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't just history. It was a mother's anguish, preserved in ink and paper. She frantically searched through more letters. Ruth Patterson had been Constance's sister, had kept her correspondence for decades. There were more. Letters tracking the boy's progress in Boston, careful updates sent through intermediaries, never direct communication that might expose the truth. The boy's new name was Thomas Ashford. His new family had connections to Boston's abolitionist movement, progressive Quakers who understood the dangerous game being played. Thomas would be educated, protected, given opportunities his mother could never provide. But the price, the unbearable price, was that he would never know her name, never understand the sacrifice that had given him his freedom. With a name finally in hand, Sarah's investigation accelerated. Thomas Ashford appeared in Boston City records in June 1889, listed as the adopted son of William and Eleanor Ashford, proprietors of a textile business on Beacon Hill. School enrollment records showed Thomas attending the prestigious Boston Latin School from 1891 to 1896. His academic records were exceptional: mathematics, literature, classical languages. A newspaper clipping from 1894 mentioned young Thomas Ashford winning a citywide essay competition. But Sarah noticed something peculiar in the school's annual photographs. Thomas always stood at the edges, never quite centered with his classmates. In group compositions, he was frequently positioned in ways that isolated him slightly. Even in success, there was separation. She found his enrollment at Harvard College in 1896, one of only a handful of students admitted from Boston Latin that year. His major was listed as law. Newspaper mentions were sparse but consistent. A model student, respectable, unremarkable in all the ways that mattered for someone trying not to draw attention. Sarah tracked his graduation in 1900, then his admission to the Massachusetts bar in 1901. Thomas Ashford, attorney at law, established a small practice in Boston's financial district. Marriage records from 1903 showed he'd wed Elizabeth Whitmore, daughter of a banker. The wedding announcement in the Boston Globe described a tasteful ceremony at Park Street Church. The accompanying photograph showed a handsome young man with light brown hair, hazel eyes, and features that could have been Mediterranean, Irish, or any of a dozen European ancestries. He'd succeeded in the masquerade, but at what cost? Sarah found property records showing Thomas and Elizabeth had purchased a home in Cambridge in 1905. Birth records indicated 2 children, Margaret in 1904 and William Jr. in 1906. He'd built a life, a family, a career, all constructed on a foundation of necessary deception. But had he ever wondered about the woman who'd given birth to him? Had he ever suspected the truth? Sarah needed to know if Thomas ever learned about his origins. She contacted the Boston Historical Society and explained her research. A young archivist named Jennifer Rodriguez became intrigued and began searching their collections for any Ashford family materials. 3 weeks later, Jennifer called with news. "We have a donation from 1952. Personal effects of Thomas Ashford, who died in 1948. There's a locked wooden box that was never opened. The donation paperwork says it was only to be opened for serious historical research. I think this qualifies." Sarah took the first train to Boston. The box was small, mahogany, with brass hinges tarnished by age. Jennifer had arranged for them to open it in the conservation lab, with proper documentation and witnesses. Sarah's hands shook as Jennifer carefully worked the old lock. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, was a photograph, the exact same pose, the same dress, the same haunted eyes. But this print had something the Historical Society's version didn't. On the reverse, in that same feminine handwriting Sarah had seen in Constance's letters, were words written in ink that had faded to brown. "My beloved son, born March 14th, 1881. You carry my love into a world I cannot follow. Be happy, be free, be everything we dreamed. Your mother, who will never stop loving you. Constance Marie." Beneath the photograph was an envelope sealed with red wax addressed simply, "To Thomas, when you are ready." "Should we open it?" Jennifer asked softly. Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Inside was a letter, dated December 20th, 1920, in the careful script of an elderly woman. "My dear boy, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and perhaps enough time has passed that the truth can finally be told. I am your mother, not the kind woman who raised you, though I bless her memory and am grateful beyond words for her love. but the woman who bore you, who held you for 8 years before making the most terrible and necessary choice of my life." The letter continued in Constance's dignified but heartbroken voice, explaining the circumstances of Thomas's early life. She had been born free in Philadelphia in 1855, daughter of a successful tailor who served both black and white clients. Her family had prospered through hard work and careful navigation of Philadelphia's complex racial landscape. She'd married James, a skilled carpenter, in 1878. Thomas was born in 1881, and from the beginning they'd noticed his unusually light complexion. Constance's own grandmother had been of mixed race, and those genetics had emerged strongly in Thomas. "We loved you completely," she wrote. "Your father would hold you for hours, singing old songs, making you laugh. We thought perhaps we could keep you, raise you in our community, protect you with our love. But as you grew, it became clear that you looked white, could pass for white, and we understood what that meant, what doors it might open that would forever be closed to us." The letter described Philadelphia in the 1880s with brutal honesty. The segregated schools where black children received textbooks 10 years out of date, the professional limitations, the daily humiliations and dangers. Thomas had witnessed some of it, even as a young child. A white shopkeeper had once refused to serve Constance while Thomas stood beside her, telling her to "get that white child away from here before someone thinks you stole him." That night, your father and I made the decision. We spent 2 years preparing, saving money, making connections through the church. We contacted families in Boston who were part of the abolitionist movement, people who understood what we were trying to do. The Ashfords agreed to take you, to raise you as their own, to give you the education and opportunities we never could. The day they'd gone to Henderson's studio had been choreographed carefully. The dress, borrowed from a wealthy white family Constance's father had served. The formal pose, the lighting, all designed to create a photographic document that could support Thomas's new identity if questions ever arose. "I held you the night before. You fell asleep in my arms, and I memorized everything. Your breathing, your warmth, the way your hand clutched my finger. In the morning we told you that you were going on an adventure, to live with new parents who would teach you wonderful things. You were excited, my brave boy. You didn't understand, you would never come home." The letter revealed that Thomas had learned the truth in 1921, when he was 40 years old. Constance had written to him through an intermediary, a pastor who'd been part of the original network that facilitated his placement. She'd been diagnosed with heart disease and knew her time was limited. She wanted him to know the truth before she died. According to the letter, Thomas had traveled to Philadelphia in January 1921, disguised as a lawyer investigating family property matters. They'd met in a church basement, mother and son, strangers after 32 years. Sarah found corroboration of this meeting in Thomas's personal diary, also in the Historical Society's box. His entry from January 15, 1921, was written in handwriting that wavered between control and emotion. "I met my mother today, my real mother. I have spent 40 years building a life based on a lie. No, not a lie. A sacrifice I never asked for, but have benefited from every day. How do I reconcile the man I've become with the truth of who I was born to be? I am Thomas Ashford, Harvard graduate, attorney, husband, father, but I am also the son of Constance Marie, a woman who loved me enough to give me away. She is elderly now, frail, but her eyes, God help me, I have her eyes. We spoke for 3 hours. She asked nothing of me, wanted no recognition, no acknowledgement that might endanger what I've built. She only wanted to see me once more, to know that her sacrifice had been worth it. I told her I have a good life, a loving wife, beautiful children, respect in my community. I told her I am happy. She wept. I wept. We both knew I could never publicly acknowledge her, could never introduce her to my children, could never call her mother except in that basement room. When we parted, she pressed this photograph into my hands, the one from Henderson's studio, the one she'd kept hidden for 32 years. On the back, she'd written words of love I will treasure until I die. Thomas had kept that photograph secret for the remaining 27 years of his life, locked in the mahogany box. He'd never told his wife, never told his children. The burden of knowing, Sarah realized, had been as heavy as the original deception. Sarah knew she had to find Thomas Ashford's living descendants. Through genealogical databases and public records, she traced his line forward. His daughter Margaret had married and had 3 children. His son William Jr. had 2. The family tree extended to the present day, with great-great-grandchildren living across Massachusetts and beyond. She focused on Thomas's oldest living descendant, his granddaughter Catherine Morrison, age 87, living in a retirement community in Cambridge. Sarah called and explained she was researching historical photography and had discovered information about Catherine's grandfather. When they met 3 days later, Catherine was sharp-minded and curious, surrounded by family photographs in her small apartment. "Grandfather Thomas died when I was 7, she said. "I remember him as kind but reserved, always impeccably dressed. He never spoke much about his childhood." Sarah opened her laptop and showed Catherine the 1889 portrait. "Does this look familiar?" Catherine leaned forward, studying it carefully. "No, I've never seen this. Who is this child?" "It's your grandfather," Sarah said gently, "when he was 8 years old." She spent the next hour explaining everything: Constance's sacrifice, the Philadelphia network, Henderson's role, the secret meeting in 1921, the locked box. Catherine listened in silence, her expression moving through shock, disbelief, and finally, tears. "Are you telling me we're black?" she asked finally. "Your grandfather was born to a black mother in Philadelphia," Sarah said. "He was raised as white, lived as white, and built his entire life on that identity. But yes, you have African-American ancestry." Catherine sat back, processing. "All my life, we've been this proper Boston family, Mayflower descendants, Harvard legacies, and it was all, what, a lie?" "Not a lie," Sarah said firmly. "A survival strategy. Your great-great-grandmother loved your grandfather so much that she gave him up so he could have a future. That's not deception. That's sacrifice." Catherine's eyes filled with tears again. "She never saw him again after that meeting in 1921? "No. Constance died in 1923. Thomas attended her funeral, but from a distance. He couldn't risk being seen, couldn't acknowledge who she was to him." "How lonely that must have been," Catherine whispered. "For both of them." Sarah's research was published in the Journal of American History 6 months later, accompanied by the 1889 portrait and excerpts from Constance's letters. The article titled "Passing and Sacrifice: One Family's Negotiation of Racial Identity in Victorian America" generated immediate attention. Catherine Morrison, along with 17 other living descendants of Thomas Ashford, held a private gathering in Philadelphia. They visited the church basement where Thomas and Constance had reunited a century earlier. Together, they viewed the original portrait, now on loan from the Historical Society. Catherine stood before the photograph of her grandfather as a child, seeing it with new understanding. "He looks terrified," she said softly, "dressed up like a doll, posing for a picture that would erase everything he knew. He was so brave. They all were." The family decided to donate the mahogany box and its contents to the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, where it would become part of an exhibit on passing and racial identity. The portrait would be displayed alongside Constance's letters and Thomas's diary, telling a story that had been hidden for over a century. But they kept copies, printed photographs they could hold, share, remember. The family that had been white for 5 generations now had to reconcile with a history they'd never known, ancestors they'd never acknowledged. At the donation ceremony, Catherine spoke publicly for the first time. "My grandfather lived a double life, not by choice, but by necessity. His mother loved him enough to let him go, to sacrifice her own happiness for his future. That portrait isn't just a photograph of a child in a dress. It's a testament to the impossible choices black families had to make, the love that demanded separation, the courage it took to survive." Sarah stood in the audience, watching the portrait she'd discovered displayed under museum lights. The child's haunted eyes seemed to look directly at her, carrying secrets finally brought to light. Henderson's photograph, created as an instrument of passing, had become something else entirely, evidence of love, sacrifice, and the brutal realities of American racial history. The seemingly innocent portrait of a well-dressed child now told the truth it had been created to conceal. In uncovering Thomas's story, Sarah had given Constance what she'd never had in life: recognition, honor, and the knowledge that her sacrifice had not been forgotten. The portrait that had been designed to erase a black child's identity had ultimately become the proof that he and his mother's love had existed. Some secrets, Sarah reflected, deserve to be hidden, but others deserve to be known, no matter how long it takes to uncover them.